Because you know Dansby's going to be shortstop.
Yeah.
You know Nico's going to be second base. You know Seiya and Happ are going to be in the corner outfields. You know Justin Steele, Kyle Hendricks, Jameson Taillon, and Shota Imanaga, they're going to be in the rotation. But those last few starting spots, those last few roster spots, how do some of these guys stand out? How do these guys put themselves above the rest? That's what I like to see, because those are the roster battles at this point, is those last few spots in some of those starting positions. How do those guys stand out and win those jobs on their own?
Hey, what's up, Setup Nation? Thanks for checking this episode out as we get ready for spring training games here in Mesa, Arizona. This is a fun episode with Ryan Herrera, but a quick story. About a year and a half ago, before the 2023 season started, I was craving Cubs content. I was missing out because it was the off season. So I just Googled Cubs podcast and Cubs YouTube channel, and CHGO popped up. And honestly, that was one of the reasons that I ended up starting the Setup Man podcast and YouTube channel, was because I just love the podcast. I love that they were experts. I love especially Ryan coming on here. He is a true expert down on the field, talking to a lot of the players and coaches. And that was one of the things that got me excited about starting the Setup Man podcast and YouTube channel. So it was really fun and a cool moment for me to have Ryan on the show, because he's part of the reason that I started this. But we're going to talk right now about Cubs spring training. Just ended workouts and now getting ready to go into games. There's a lot of pieces still trying to be figured out, and Ryan being down on the ground and taking a look at this, I was interested to hear his perspective. So let's get to it right now with Ryan Herrera on the Setup Man podcast. Hey, what's up, Setup Nation? We are excited to have Ryan Herrera from CHGO. He is a Cubs beat reporter for CHGO and become a friend of mine, and I definitely want to talk to you, Ryan, about spring training, man. Like, it's first of all, it's fun being out here with the Hawaiian shirts.
Yeah.
Got to finally see it in person.
It's my thing. It's become my thing the last couple of years, and you know, closet full of them. We love the Hawaiians. Like Hawaiian Ryan is what they call me.
There we go. I like it. So, Ryan, you know, there's a lot of things, if we want to call it things, happening in spring training right now. There's been, you know, overall the off season a little bit slow, but let's just focus on spring right now. We just finished the last day of workouts. Where do you kind of see being maybe some of the puzzle pieces so far that maybe have started to expose themselves, of like, all right, this is where I can start to see, based on where guys are playing at spring training, where Jed and Craig are seeing some guys going?
Well, I think one, and we saw it earlier today, they were doing a fly ball drill, obviously right here behind us, actually, on field one. Alexander Canario out in center field with Mike Talkman taking fly balls out there. And, you know, I don't know that says a whole lot. Obviously, he's in big league camp. He was on the active roster last year, so it's natural for him to be out there. But I would say that when you look at what this center field picture could be, and Cody Bellinger obviously is not a Cub right now. Pete Crow Armstrong may start the season in AAA. Like, there may be an opportunity for Alexander Canario, and obviously Mike Talkman as well, to be out there for the start of the season. May not be what fans want to hear, you know, but depending on what happens in the next few weeks, and if you're just looking at the roster right now, like there's a spot that if Alexander Canario can take this spring, kind of take the opportunity and run with it, you know, see what he does in spring games, impress the coaches and during workouts, like there's no reason to believe that he couldn't be on the opening day roster out there in center field with the Cubs.
Okay, interesting. So Canario has never really been a guy that we really talk about his defense. Do you think that would be a liability? I mean, are we kind of looking at a Morel situation, like we're not quite sure where we're getting at a defense and just put him in there for his bat?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know specifically. I would say it's a Morel situation. Like Morel, we've talked about that. You know, he's getting a chance to play every day during spring training at third base. Take, I don't know, almost 100% of his reps at third base or something close to that. Where they're going to give him the opportunity to just focus there and see if he can make it work. With Canario, like he's an outfielder, right? He's played a lot of outfield, and maybe he's best served to be in the corner for the future of his career. But you know, you have Ian Happ there, you have Seiya Suzuki there, and maybe a place where he needs to be out in center field. And I don't know if I'd say he's a bad defender out there. But he's not PCA. And we know
well,
that.
No one is, yeah.
Yeah, right. He's not PCA defensively. He's not Cody Bellinger defensively. But it's a point where, especially if there's a platoon out there, maybe Mike Talkman, Alexander Canario, maybe that's what you see out there. So he's not out there every single day, but it's a way to get him playing time, way to get him at the bat. I know maybe you're looking at it, best case scenario, he could be the team's DH, right?
Yeah.
Like Christopher Morel figures out third base. Pete Crow Armstrong is either ready to start opening day or the Cubs re-sign Cody Bellinger, and you're looking for a spot for Canario. oh, he's got a great bat, we can just plug him at DH, right? That may not be what happens. So I don't think the Cubs are uncomfortable with him playing defense out there in center field. It may not be an everyday thing, and that's something that has to be considered. But he's someone that I could see him being, maybe not opening day center field, but definitely playing a role out there to start the season.
You mentioned Bellinger, of course. That's been the roller coaster, emotional roller coaster off season long for all of us Cubs fans. So when you got here for spring training and you heard Craig Counsell say, if CubsCon, we were in the 4th or 5th inning, now we're kind of getting the closer warmed up. And then there was a couple of remarks that he made of where I was just kind of like, man, it just sounds like he's already moving on from Cody. But now you have guys like Bruce Levine coming on and saying that both sides need each other. You have Bob Nightingale saying, I don't think anyone else is involved except for the Cubs. It feels like the Cubs have the upper hand. Do you think Jed has played this the right way? Do you think that this is inevitable?
Well, the funny thing about that is that I think the idea of did he play it the right way or not is like kind of flexible, and it can change based on the timing of things, right? Like I think right now you're looking at it, and I think Jed Hoyer has played it the right way with the Bellinger, Scott Boras situation. Why? Because he's still a free agent. None of the other 29 teams have gone out and given Scott Boras what he'd like. Now, we go out a few weeks from now, Cody Bellinger signs somewhere else. Maybe your opinion on that changes a little bit and you don't think he played it the right way. And then you look a couple years down the road, maybe like in this scenario, right? Maybe even a couple years down the road, Cody Bellinger hasn't lived up to the contract and you think, oh, he dodged a bullet, Jed, and he did play it the right way, right? So it can change over time.
Yeah.
But right now, I would sit here and say because Cody Bellinger's still a free agent, because the Cubs still feel like the clear favorite to land him, and because no other teams have gone out and given Scott Boras what he's asking for, I would have to say that Jed has played it the right way. It may not be the way that fans want him to play it. I'm sure a lot of fans out there would just say, give him the $200 million and call it a day, but that's not how they're operating right now, and I can't disagree with the way they've done it.
The last couple days, I've seen the infield, and you've got Morel and Madrigal at third. You got Wisdom at first over with Michael Busch, and then Mastrobuoni's taking some reps over at second with Nico. What do you think about that setup?
I think it makes sense. Again, with Morel, with the Craig Counsell saying the other day they're going to let him get a lot of run and a lot of reps at third base, most of his reps at third base, at least to start spring. Madrigal, we know, has moved over to third base, and right now, unless Morel can figure something out, I think you're probably looking at the way the roster is constructed. Madrigal's still getting a lot of time over there at third base. But like Wisdom, moving over to first base, we've seen him play there a little bit with the Cubs, and he has some experience there in his minor league career. But, we talked to Craig Counsell as well about that. And Michael Busch is going to get a lot of run, don't get me wrong. But seeing what Patrick Wisdom can do there, he didn't say it was going to be a platoon or anything like that. But seeing what Wisdom can do there, seeing how, maybe he can take a little bit of pressure off Michael Busch, as he doesn't have to be the guy at first base or anything, but just a way to see what Patrick Wisdom can do over there on that side of the infield. See if he can pick that up defensively and be, at least, again, similar to Morel, a serviceable guy they're comfortable having out there. I do believe that Michael Busch will be getting the bulk of the opportunities at first base, whether that's in spring training games or reps or whatever. Like, they traded for him for a reason. They want him to succeed at first base, and they're going to give him every opportunity to do so. But it's another way to see what Wisdom can play with. Craig Counsell loves the bat. Obviously, it's game-changing type bat. If he can, in the right situation, could change a game with one swing of the bat. So definitely a way to see if there's another area, another part of the field that Wisdom can do that. Mastrobuoni, you mentioned, he looks at me, or I look at him, and he strikes me as like he's going to be the utility guy. Yeah. He may move around, right? He can play second base. He can play third base. He can even play shortstop in a pinch, and maybe outfield every now and then, whatever. Emergency situations, of course, but like he's a guy that they may just end up moving around, and he has that lefty bat, which they don't have a lot of, and he hit pretty well towards the end of the season. So he strikes me as a guy that is just going to be a utility guy, bench bat, fill in and produce maybe as a pinch hitter, pinch runner, whatever. But I look at him, he may move around a little bit throughout spring, and I think that's because he has the ability to play multiple positions.
Well, you're forgetting the biggest part. He's in the best shape of his life.
Everyone's in the best shape of their life. He's not the tallest guy, but he's he is very ripped, and
Yeah,
I'll give him credit for that. Like, he looks like he put in a lot of work this offseason.
know,
I think he looked like that also last year.
did he? Okay. Well, and I didn't see him up close, so I'm not in Chicago like you guys. So you mentioned wisdom, right? With the bat, it could be a game changer. We saw it the other day with his home run against Shota. Really, the only guy who had a good swing off of Shota. What did you think of Shota, seeing him in person?
So seeing Shota, I mean, there are obviously times when you can see the stuff and see the movement and see the things that made him really good in Japan. One of the star pitchers in Japan, and one of the reasons why the Cubs wanted to bring him in. Like, he's got the movement, he's got the stuff. He doesn't have top tier velocity, but you know, the way Tommy Harvey or Craig Counsell or even Yan Gomes have talked about it, like it plays faster.
Yeah.
Just the way that it comes in on you. So you saw that a little bit, but you also saw, as you mentioned, the Wisdom home run was a slider that he kind of left too far up in the zone. And one of the things he talked about was like just a small thing, right? The baseball, the difference in the baseball feels small. Maybe some people forget about it, but there's a little bit of a baseball from, you know, NPB where he is coming from and Major League Baseball now. And at the beginning of spring, he talked about that the breaking balls maybe something that takes a little bit longer to transition to and get consistently good with the new baseball, or the different baseball that he's pitching with. So you saw that was the pitch that he gave the home run up. So it's a transition period, right? It's an adjustment period for him coming over to America and playing Major League Baseball. So I won't be shocked if there's some struggles there. I won't be shocked if he has a lot of success too, because you look back 2 years ago with Seiya, you know, he had his own struggles and he had his own successes to start his Major League career. So with Shota Imanaga, I'm looking forward to seeing that period and seeing what he can do and seeing, you know, I don't want to say how long it takes for him to transition, because that's a long thing, and you understand that. But I'm excited to see what he can do when he starts playing in games in spring, when you get to the season, and see what he can do there. Because another guy that the Cubs invested a lot of money in to bring him over from Japan, and he's a guy that I look at and I'm like, oh, he could be a pretty big boost to this ball club right now.
It was fun watching him face Seiya.
Oh, that was great. That was great.
Just the swings that, you know, there was that check swing that he wasn't quite sure on, and then the way that he struck him out, you could tell. I mean, you know, pitchers are always a little bit ahead of most hitters, but that was a fun back and forth for sure.
Oh, it was great. And, you know, talking to Shota after, he mentioned how he, you know, through an interpreter, he mentioned how he faced Seiya many times in Japan. They overlapped for a few years on different teams, so he did get to face him. And he talked about that, you know, he told Seiya, or him and Seiya talked about that they were going to face each other and that he was only going to throw him fastballs. Then he saw Seiya in the box and changed his mind and threw him a breaking ball to start the at-bat. You saw that. Yeah, like you mentioned, it was a fun matchup to see. It's the matchup everyone wanted to see. If you were over there, as you were, all eyes were on that part of the field when Seiya stepped to the plate. So, yeah, fun matchup. They obviously had fun with it, and just one of those cool things to see, right? Two guys that faced each other a bunch of times in Japan coming over, and now they're teammates, but they're facing each other for the first time here. So I think that's a pretty cool thing to see.
Talking about the bullpen, you know, really a lot of the same from last year, but now you could kind of say there's more of an identity because of how Adbert and how Merriweather and Leiter really emerged last year. And you can argue, like, there's three guys on this team that could close games: Merriweather, Neris, and maybe even like a Leiter or Luke Little coming in. And Luke's stuff is just nasty. So I really am excited about where this bullpen is at. Where's your, you know, gauge right now in the bullpen?
Yeah, I know you look at the way they ended, and you mentioned Leiter, Merriweather, and Adbert, and you even throw Michael Fulmer in there. At the end of the season, they were all kind of out of gas or hurt,
for sure,
right? So they all found a groove over summer. We saw how great that bullpen could be when they found that groove over summer. It didn't end well in September, but I look at it as Adbert, Mark Leiter, and Julian Merriweather. Like, those guys they've grown comfortable in the roles now. They didn't have to figure it out anymore. They did that last year. Now they're coming into the season with a full idea of, like, hey, this might be my workload. Might be the role that I'm in, and this might be how I have to get my body through a 162-game season. So, yeah, I love those three guys for the Cubs bullpen. I think those guys are going to be pretty good for them. You mentioned Neris, a guy with championship pedigree and a track record of pitching a lot over a full season on top of the playoffs every year. So another big-time addition for the Cubs right now. And then you mentioned Daniel Palencia, Two young guys, obviously. Palencia got a little bit more run, was up a little earlier than Luke Little, but both of those guys have velocity. We see it. We see it on the backfield. They can bring it, and so I'm excited to see them get a little bit more run. I know, David Ross didn't play them as much towards the end of the season, didn't give them a lot of run, and I can't fault him too much for that, because when you're every game's a 1 or 2 run game, as it felt like all September was, it is a little harder to trust unproven guys, right? So I don't fault him too much for that, but I am excited to see them get a little bit more run now. But even look at Drew Smiley, Javier Assad, Hayden Wisniewski, like all those guys could end up in the bullpen as well to start the year. Javier Assad's a guy who's like a chameleon. He started a lot, then he would go to the bullpen, have a lot of success. Drew Smiley, struggled as a starter towards the second half of the year, and he goes to the bullpen and looks a lot better. Hayden Wisniewski didn't quite have success as a starter, but when he was getting put in matchups out of the bullpen, like, he had success. So you see a lot of good pieces here, and guys that are now a year into their roles. I am looking forward to seeing what this bullpen can do. I think they're in a good place. I think, especially adding Hector Neris and even Yency Almonte, right? A guy who I think is a good change of scenery type candidate. So there's good pieces there. We'll have to see how it plays out, but I do like the fact that a lot of those guys in there now have a full year under their belt in their roles and can kind of hit the season running with that knowledge intact.
One little side note, just for everyone listening at home too, we just did an entire live session with Hayden Wisniewski, and I know you weren't able to see it, but one of the things I was really encouraged by was last year, right, his tough thing was lefties. He had a really tough time getting out lefties. Well, he struck out Mervis twice, and it looked like one was on a cutter, one was on a changeup, but his changeup was getting some really good looks. So I'm excited. If he can develop that and be good against lefties, then like you said, I mean, he was hitting 98 at the end of the season.
Yeah, I know we had Tommy Hotovy on our show, the CA Show Cubs show, a few weeks back, and kind of asked about Wisniewski. Right? Like, they're not giving up on him as a starting pitcher. It's just that he had clear issues getting lefties out that were going to be something he had to work on. And so you mentioned it, like, if he can continue to, or if he can improve against lefties, that's something we saw with Adbert when he was a starter, that he had his own struggles versus righty or versus lefties compared to his success against righties, and now he's thriving as a closer. But Wisniewski, they're not giving up on him as a starter. If he can consistently get lefties out where they can't just match up against him every game, that could go a long way towards, maybe he's the guy that's starting in this rotation later in the season, So
I got 2 questions for you, and we'll let you go. You mentioned David Ross, Craig Counsell. Now that you have seen a spring with both of them, what's been the difference?
It's kind of tough to see the difference from our angle, but talking to,
even if players maybe
talking to people around, Craig is very big on kind of individual work and doing stuff. It's one of those things where, and it's still early in spring, right? Like, you haven't gotten to spring games yet or any of that. But yeah, it's just small differences that, whether it's focusing more on individual work or him kind of going around the area versus being in one area for longer periods of time. It's little stuff, and it's hard to notice. And honestly, again, from my vantage point, I don't see a whole huge difference because the players are all doing the work and stuff like that anyway. But the way that they talk about Craig Counsell as, him doing a pregame speech or getting to know all these guys at a personal level and stuff like that. A lot of these guys, they love David Ross as well, but Craig Counsell is just a different addition, maybe just a different voice to have to these guys. So I'm excited to see, what he can do as a manager that's any different from David Ross. We know that he's one of the best managers in baseball, so I'm curious what he can bring from that and add it to this team.
Cool. Last question. Results mean almost nothing in spring training, but if we were to look at some results, either from a player perspective, a group perspective, team perspective, is there any results that you're looking for to paint a clearer picture going into the season?
It's like you said, spring results don't really matter all that much. You take it with a grain of salt. Now, that said, if a guy is, because one of the things is, like, you might see guys give up a couple home runs during a start, right? Their first start of spring games. But then you find out that, I was just throwing my curveball every pitch, right? You find stuff out like that. So if he gets a couple home runs off on a curveball, but he had thrown only curveballs, then you don't feel too bad about it. But if he had a lot of success only throwing curveballs, then you feel a little bit better about it. Like, that curveball must be working. So what I'm looking to see out of guys like Jordan Wicks, right? The guy that as a fifth starter candidate. He could be that fifth starter to start the year. How does he look in spring games? He's starting the Cubs-Sox game tomorrow. So how does he look in spring games? Is he having success? Is that changeup looking good? All that kind of stuff. And seeing maybe he stands out and earns that fifth starter role. So guys like that, Canario, again, Morel, we've talked about him. Can he show consistent success in a game situation at third base when they give him the opportunity? Stuff like that. It's a lot of because Dansby is going to be shortstop.
Yeah.
Nico's going to be second base. Seiya and Happ are going to be in the corner outfields. Justin Steele, Kyle Hendricks, Jameson Taillon, and Shota Imanaga, they're going to be in the rotation. But those last few starting spots, those last few roster spots, how do some of these guys stand out? How do these guys put themselves above the rest? That's what I like to see, because those are the roster battles at this point, is those last few spots in some of those starting positions. How do those guys stand out and win those jobs on their own?
Cool. Ryan, one of the reasons I started the show is because I started binge watching CHGO. So I'm just excited to have you on, man. And guys, go check out the CHGO podcast and YouTube channel as well. Appreciate your time, man.
Thank you.
All right, guys, go check out CHGO. It's an awesome podcast and YouTube channel. Either way, I loved going on the live ones every single day, Monday through Thursday. They're going live, and then on Friday they have a recorded version. Go check it out. And you can just Google CHGO to go find that on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. That's going to do it for me now here over at Sloan Park in Mesa, Arizona. Cubs fans and Setup Nation, I'm going to go put my arm on ice.